There are 16 of them. You could put them all in a football field and still have 5 to spare. Special Counsel Robert Mueller has hired 16 lawyers to help him slog through the Trump-Russia investigation. He hired lawyer number 16 just this week, a guy named Greg Andres. Mr. Andres used to be the Deputy Assistant Attorney General at the Justice Department's Criminal Division. He specialized in fraud and foreign bribery. And now he's putting that expertise back to use, flexing his fraud and foreign bribery muscles for the special counsel working on the Trump-Russia investigation. The lineup of attorneys working for Mueller is like a fantasy league of super draft of all-star attorneys. He has experts in white-collar crime, organized crime, money laundering, cybersecurity. He's got a skilled witness flipper, a fluent Russian speaker. He even has a freaking Watergate prosecutor working on this thing. It's like the dream team of criminal investigations. Now, we've long known that the President of the United States is not happy about this investigation into his campaign and his administration. He told the New York Times that if Robert Mueller started looking into his personal finances, that would be a red line. He called it a violation of what the special counsel is allowed to poke his nose into. We also know that Robert Mueller has crashed right on through that red line. His probe has reportedly expanded to start following the complicated trail of Trump's business transactions and finances. And then there's today's bombshell news from the Wall Street Journal that the Trump-Russia investigation now reportedly has its very own grand jury, a sign that this investigation is not slowing down anytime soon. So if the president wanted to fire Robert Mueller, if he wanted to throw some cold water on the witness flipper and the Watergate prosecutor and the grand jury and all the rest of it, he does actually have a few options to push Mueller out of the way, which is why there's a bipartisan push in Congress right now to take those options off the table. There's a quartet of senators from both sides of the aisle cooking up 2 different bills right now that would block Trump from firing the special counsel. 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans working to shore up Robert Mueller and safeguard him from the president so that he can see this thing through to the end. So the question is, will it work? Joining us now, Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware, who, along with Republican Senator Thom Tillis, introduced the Bipartisan Special Counsel Integrity Act. Senator Coons, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Joy.
And one of the interesting things when I read the story, one of the stories about this today, is that Thom Tillis approached you with this idea. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
That's right. That's right. Senator Tillis and I serve on the Judiciary Committee together. And he came up to me on the floor and asked if I'd be interested in moving forward quickly on a bill that would provide back-end protections for the special counsel. Senator Graham and Senator Booker have already introduced a bill that would provide some front-end protections. So if the president tries to fire special counsel Robert Mueller, the bill that Senators Graham and Senator Booker have introduced would provide some speed bump, a 3-judge panel that would have to review that to see if it was appropriate. The bill that I've introduced with Senator Thom Tillis would also allow the special counsel to go to court and to sue to be reinstated. And a similar 3-judge panel would review whether or not he had been inappropriately removed. Each approach takes a different side, pre-firing or post-firing, so that if either one of these bills moves forward, we've got some greater protections for Bob Mueller and for this important special counsel investigation.
Well, you know, however good these bills are and however many protections that they provide potentially to Bob Mueller, they still have to get to the floor. And so far, Mitch McConnell, who runs the Senate, has run it in a very particular way. He only wants to do things with Republicans. He's shown no sense of any interest in doing anything on a bipartisan line. And he's a staunch supporter of Donald Trump. So do you expect either of these 2 bills to get to the floor?
Well, Joy, we just had an interesting moment in the Senate where, despite opposition from the White House, from the president, a strong bipartisan vote on a Russia sanctions bill, on a bill that came to the floor under Mitch McConnell's leadership, produced a bill that the president ultimately was compelled to sign by the veto-proof majorities by which it passed both the House and the Senate. So while there may not be great enthusiasm for this bill initially today from the majority leader, my hunch is that as conversations happen over the break, with both Republican and Democratic senators, that support for it will quickly build, and we may well see this bill on the floor in the fall.
And just in talking to your colleagues, do you think this bill could pass with a veto-proof majority? Because one would assume that Trump would veto it.
Well, I'm optimistic that that may happen. We've seen already a number of calls today from my office and to Senator Tillis's office for folks interested in co-sponsorship, and I had a good conversation on the floor with Senator Booker and Senator Graham, thanking them for their leadership in this issue and exploring ways we might work together going forward. This is the first time I can remember Senator Tillis, in particular, stepping forward and taking on a tough stance against the president, and I think this is just one more sign that we're seeing an increasing number of Republicans eager to find ways that we can strengthen the separation of powers and strengthen the Senate's hand in this ongoing difficult situation where there's an important investigation we need to protect.
And let's say that neither of these two bills, neither of these two bipartisan bills was to wind up becoming law for one reason or another. If Donald Trump found a way, let's say he fired Rod Rosenstein and he got down to somebody in the Department of Justice who would fire Bob Mueller for him, is there a possibility that we could see the return of the independent counsel statute?
We might. We might see some action by the Senate, even though we are technically in recess. We do come back into session every 3 days while we're out on so-called recess for the month of August. And we might see bipartisan action to reintroduce and repass the independent counsel statute. I frankly think the most likely action is that we would insist on the reinstatement of Bob Mueller. He enjoys very broad support in the Senate, both among Republicans and Democrats, because of his long service as the FBI director, because of his record of respectable leadership as a senior federal prosecutor. And I do think the news of today that he's impaneled a grand jury in Washington will make the president really take some pause here. As you've reported earlier, a federal grand jury in the hands of a skilled senior prosecutor like Robert Mueller is a very dangerous tool indeed against the president. Yeah, and if you could send the president a message tonight, because I'm sure he's not amused by the news that he's hearing, what would be the message that you would send him from the United States Senate, or at least from the Democrats on the Senate? It is in the president's interest, it's in the country's interest to let this investigation go forward. The president should have nothing to worry from a thorough federal investigation if he's got nothing to hide. If he takes an abrupt action now and either fires the attorney general or directs the firing of Bob Mueller, there will be a strong bipartisan reaction from the Senate. And I think the consequences for him will be even more grave if he does that. All right, Senator Chris Coons, really appreciate your time. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, today we got to see something that the White House did not mean to make public. That story's next.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.